that was actually going to be a question, because we talked last time about civility, respect. How is this showing up? How is it going to show up now for you guys? What does that look like? Do you see a difference between civility and respect? I'll say with the definitions, how they define the term civility. Again, they say formal politeness, um, and respect. They say due regard for feelings, wishes, rights, or traditions of others. So, how does this look like now, post-election, for you? Because, like with you, Freddie, you said you removed yourself to not even be in the space for these conversations to even happen. I will say temporarily, yeah. Oh yeah, obviously. I will say I just didn't bring it up until people brought it up. I also had different reactions. People would talk to me, assuming I voted for Harris, which whatever I did. But they would go in on the other side and do the whole they're all racist, misogynist, and I do believe racist and misogynist voted for him, but I don't think all of them are that. And so it was very comfortable navigating those conversations. But yesterday I went out with two of my friends that work at IUF, and we all voted the same, but we were able to even kind of still man the other side because they had family members that voted for Trump, and they were thankful that we had a space of nuance. They were like, I wasn't even going to bring it up at IUF because I knew people were so radically left that if I would have said one little thing that where I'm like, I kind of understand the side, they felt like the conversation would have been done. So I've been civil at work with not bringing it up at all. But I would be respectful of other people's traditions and whatever they wanted, rights, being voting for Trump. And I would have the conversation with anyone in and out of work. But some people are just too spent. They don't have the emotional bandwidth for that, which is fair enough for that. But yeah, anyone can jump in here. With civility, respect, setting boundaries, Jessarae talked about last time as well. Freddie set the boundary of not putting himself in that space.
So for me, I know, something, I don't know if we've talked about it yet here, but it's not a new concept. But the idea that, like, we are at a point where, as a nation, like, our demographics are changing. The internet has connected us to things that, people in rural areas, for instance, maybe never would have been exposed to otherwise. The world has changed a lot. And what it's felt like we're grappling with for a really long time is, for a culture to work, for a culture to be cohesive, you have to have a shared belief system. And it feels like there's almost this ideological war happening for what is America's shared belief system going to be and what is the reality of that. And I think for me and for a lot of other people, especially the second time around, I had been saying pretty regularly to my husband, like, if he gets reelected, like, America is kind of getting what it deserves. Like, and I know that sounds bad, but I'm like, if we choose to reelect him after everything that's happened, from my perspective, what we're saying is some of the things that we thought we believed about ourselves, or some of us thought about America, might not be the reality for the rest of us. And so what does that look like moving forward? And are we going to be able to use this to come to a more unified understanding of, like, what Americans are truly thinking and feeling and what is our common ground? Like, can there be things that are gleaned from more people voting for Trump and for it being obvious that some of the things that we thought were going to be barriers to somebody getting reelected in this situation were clearly not barriers for, a good chunk of the population. So for me, in terms of civility, it's like, well, if we want to survive as a nation, if we want to build some type of, cultural reality that's going to be able to last and, transform, with the times, we're going to have to figure out what that common ground is and how we can get there. Because right now, even with what we're saying, like, the three of us, especially since I've known you guys, for longer, Brittany, Freddie, me, like, I don't remember during the first election any of us being like, I'm really afraid to say anything right now, because I feel like either way, it's like walking on eggshells no matter which side you're on.
Well,
I don't remember it being like that before.
We were doing BLM right when he was
Yeah.
running, right?
Yeah, and so I feel like there is like a hesitancy and a fear that's coming from all sides, or a lot more people than, you know, maybe we realize in our own little bubbles.
You're saying people are more hesitant now to say what they believe and voted for or whatever versus in 2016?
Yeah, because when I was like, okay, I'm gonna say how I really felt, but the second I said what I actually felt when I was watching his acceptance speech or whatever, I regretted it and was like, I shouldn't, like, I didn't want to say that. And I'm like, are we actually sharing this? Like, and then, you know, Freddie, you just were like, actually, maybe I don't want to say that right now. And
because cancel culture wasn't really there yet. Cancel culture was bubbling up, but it wasn't in stride as it is now, as literally quick where people lose jobs like that.
See, I've felt like I had to censor, and again, it's the settings professionally that I've found myself in, for better and worse, based on let's say the religious, political, ideological background that I came out of, are just like opposite worlds. And so both have certainly influenced me. But I've felt like for a long time there were a lot of settings that I'm in, academically, professionally, socially, where my choice is either I listen to this sort of perceived or contrived monolith, everyone agrees on this and there's no real complexity, or I'm the one who like speaks up in this setting and like makes a point, and then everyone's uncomfortable, you know, like everyone's glaring at Chris, he's the one who said the thing. And I'll just give you one example. When I was in graduate school, and this would have been 2013 to 2015, there was a professor, and actually in the long term, like I developed a decent relationship with this professor. I kind of liked him. We played some basketball together. Like we went on a trip to a conference. So, you know, there was, and sometimes he would go and drink with students after class. And so, you know, I showed up to several of those. But he said something in a class that I felt like was totally normal to say in the kinds of classes that I was in. This is in South Carolina, which is a very conservative state. But he basically said, you know, there hasn't been a good conservative thinker since Edmund Burke. That was the comment. I was like, okay, well, what is good? What is conservative? What is thinker? You know, like what are we talking about here? And of course, like that's just one of those moments where I'm like, do I like challenge the professor here, or do I just like let that stand? Like everyone else in the room is perfectly comfortable with, and then, you know, and so I did. I was like, okay, like, so we're saying like, you know, Walker Percy, like C.S. Lewis. I mean, there are people that have like conservative elements of their thought that have certainly made their mark intellectually, and like none of these were good thinkers. And I don't remember kind of his response. But yeah, it's just like stuff like that. It's like, that is just a blatantly false claim by an authoritative intellectual in a space where you shouldn't get away with that. You should immediately get challenged if you say something like that, not by one person in the room, but by everyone in the room. So that's just, I've felt like in professional, social, and academic settings for a long time, like my choices, and I've got to pick my battles. But I'm trying to think of a word that is escaping me, but like where we're, you know, like scientifically, like on like global warming, for example, which is a really complicated phenomena, which requires like some real study and care. We're sort of offered this public, like everyone agrees on this, so we don't need to talk about this, you know? And there's a lot of those. COVID was like that too. It's like, you know, like don't just get the shot, don't ask any question, you know, just get the shot. And yeah, I think that's a huge part of this problem, is that we try to create spaces in which conflict isn't allowed.
Can I piggyback off of what you were just saying? Because I think a lot of working class, especially white Americans, would agree with what you're saying. Like, there is a critique that academia is skewed so left and there isn't room for more dialogue, you know, and that, you know, the idea that like conservatives can't be intellectuals. And I think some of that, you know, that reality has an effect on a large pool of voters. And I think classism is a large portion of that. I think a lot of people feel like they're being talked down to, or they're being forced to believe something. And I think that there's a large section of the population, especially white working class people, who culturally are more likely to be like, if you are going to talk to me like I'm a child and you're going to try to tell me what to do, and they already mistrust authority for various reasons. And a lot of them mistrust the Democratic Party for very similar reasons. They feel like these are well-educated, middle and upper class people who think they know about my life, who think they understand who I am and what I've been through, but all they do is talk down to me or speak negatively about my reality.
Mm-hmm. To that, I'm thinking, like, and I don't know if you were in the chat when I mentioned this, Jessarae, but people, you know, are saying like half the country vote for Trump, half the country vote for Harris, when really it's just half of the people that voted, which is less than the people that didn't vote, which I feel like gives me some solace, because I'm like, most of the people in this country just are tired and feel probably similar to me. And I have conversations with these people, but these people are not loud like the fringes are and the extremes are. And I'm hearing this word tossed around a lot, especially at IUF, psychological safety and safe spaces and stuff like that, which I think actually paralyzes and stales conversations. And I want to know your guys' thoughts, if now more than ever, those guards need to be off. Like, is this the time where we really take risks? Like how Chris spoke up, or Jessarae saying the thing you want to say without being fearful, like, I'm gonna get canceled. Is this the time where we just say it and take that risk? Like, the majority of us that are in the middle, that are gray, that are nuanced, be louder than the extremes? Or no? Or what does that look like? I'm just speaking out loud here.
I feel like go ahead. No, you go ahead. No. I just talked a bunch. It's fine. Go ahead.
I'll go.
Go, Freddie.
I think, well, Chris, I think what you had said, you got to choose your battles. So I don't think that I want to always feel like I have to speak up in certain situations. Obviously, I'll speak up if it's like something that really someone needs to address, because I don't want to ever let my silence be validating what someone's saying, if that is not what I believe. But I think you do have to kind of pick and choose when you want to speak out, because you can't fight everything.
Yes.
You can't. I think, like, if I, you know, commented on every single thing I disagreed with, I would just be exhausted, and then I think that would really impact my own mental health. And I think that's, you know, when Trump became president the first time, I had to learn to kind of let a lot of things go, because I was mentally and emotionally exhausted with the amount of energy I spent on you know, having those conversations and voicing my opinions about different things. So I do think that there is something to be said, though, that this is an opportunity for us to have some real conversations on like what happened here, and like for us to find some common ground. But am I going to necessarily be speaking up on everything that might come about in conversations? Probably not. At least not right now. It's a little too fresh, but eventually.
I want to ask, and you don't have to answer, Freddie, but you said there's things that you sacrificed talking about in 2016, or you just let go. What was one of those things?
I mean, I think I'm more so speaking on like, when it came to like social media, for example, everyone was going off on social media, right? And voicing their opinions, and everyone felt like they had to say something because I think people were so surprised that someone like that could be elected president. And I was in the comments. I'll be the first one to admit it. I was up in the comments being like,
I was tweeting way too much.
"You
How to
trash."
lose a toxic friend.
But like, how many friends like did we all lose? I mean, maybe not. Maybe y'all are better than me. I don't know.
Someone accidentally in the most petty post that we had, and she saw it. We don't have to get into
That
it.
was completely
But it was
unrelated to
Context
this experience.
of a disagreement. That Freddie,
Well, okay, that was semi-related to what was going on, but the comment
was
to
not.
that particular thing had nothing to do with this. Anyway, thanks for bringing that up. But I'm still trying to forget about that. But yeah, I think like a lot of people were losing friends left and right, and I was like, I can't keep doing this. Like, this is exhausting, and I don't want to keep fighting with people all the time. And then as I kind of like thought about it, I'm just like, maybe I'm missing something. And I'm kind of like going through the same thing now. Like, maybe I'm missing something. What is it that I am not aware of that could help me understand why people would vote for someone who are all these things to me, and they still will vote for him anyway? Are you in that much pain, or are you in that much of a circumstance that you've been trying to get out of for a long time that you are desperate enough that you would vote for him? That's kind of like the perspective, and I don't mean desperate in a necessarily bad way, but I think some people in the middle part of the country have been ignored for a long time and feel ignored and feel that their lives don't matter. So which is why I think someone mentioned like the celebrities. I think that was a very bad move in hindsight, because it does seem like a very far removed, like, these people don't represent me at all, and could not possibly understand. Yeah. So I don't know. I just think that I'm open to having conversations, but I just feel like I don't want it to turn into how like toxic or tense that was in 2016.
Yeah.
I think that gets at the how, and that's maybe some of what we're interested in here. Because I mean, even and COVID was the worst, but like my family, like I have people who would show up to a Trump rally. And by the way, I have people who, my mom's family, the people that we're in relationship live in Butler, Pennsylvania. Some of them literally had tickets that day and did not go. And then I also had like my sisters, I'm trying to think if they're the only ones. Well, no, there's varying degrees of liberal in the family too. And then with varying degrees of extremity too. There was, I feel like my sisters and I are much better able to have a conversation at the moment. But I do think from both sides, we've learned where not to engage and where, you know, like we can't, just like Freddie's talking about, it can't be all the time, you know. I can't be like the center of your relationship to try to solve all society's problems like every day, you know, like that is exhausting. But even in my family, there was that kind of like, you know, are we going to do Thanksgiving or not during COVID? And I mean, it just erupts into this, you know, total brawl. But I do think, you know, 5 years ago or 10 years ago, I don't know that I would have done something like this because I had to, like, I was too held down by the fear of, oh my gosh, what if I say something that, you know, like my coworkers find out I blah, 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 whatever. And I don't know. Again, turned 40, like changed my lens. And it's like, man, life is short. And if I don't want to be an asshole. I don't want to just like go around and be like, you know, let me tell you why you're wrong. Let me, you know, like, but I also don't want to like edit and censor my voice so carefully in this life that one day, like I peel over and die and like no one knows really who I am either. So it's like, yeah, I guess I am at a point where I'm like, I want to speak from a place that has like some degree of humility and some degree of openness to other perspectives, while also like feeling like if I'm in a meeting at work or if I'm in, you know, a social setting, just having some drinks with some people, or, you know, like that I get to have a voice, you know, and yeah, I don't think a society in which we don't feel like we have that, you know, power is a society that we want, you know.
Anyone else have any points on that? Because I am going to move on.
So I had one response to it. I thought I did. I'm trying to remember what you said.
Dang.
I don't remember. I'm sure it was good.
It was. I'll just say that. Well, we're almost an hour and 30 minutes. So, I mean, is there anything else you guys wanted to actually discuss or a question you wanted to pose to the group? Because the last thing I was just going to ask was something that Jessarae brought up about radical empathy. And I was just going to be like, what is that?
Oh, I remember, Brittany. Okay, good. So you've used this language a few times about, is this working as it relates to you all's work in BLM? And, you know, I don't exactly know what that, you know, what you're referring to, but I can pretty easily like imagine from my own settings similar kinds of like frustrations. Like we're continuing to do this thing, it's not working. Like in my mind, in my mode of thinking, it's like, okay, let's like step back, let's rethink the strategy, you know, because it's not working. But I do think there is, you know, in my worst case way of seeing this is like there are people and groups and a political party that doesn't care if it works. What they want is like, we're doing the right thing, you know, and, you know, the fact that we lose is just more evidence that we're doing the right thing. And sort of the opposite of that might be like, you know, we won, so therefore it was right, you know, which is just as, you know, I hate using the word problematic because of the way it has been used, but in the truest sense of that word, I think that can be just as wrong, right? To assume, I think it's wrong to assume that winning is good, and it's wrong to assume that losing is good, you know? So it's not winning or losing that necessarily dictates whether this was what we should have been doing. But I will say, and again, life is short, and like material lives matter. Those are some assumptions that I bring to cultural and political engagement. And so like, yeah, I think there is a lot of stuff that gets done either out of just like lack of imagination. That's one possibility. Or another is like, maybe we're way too invested in our own self-righteousness. And I think that's like the plank that needs to be like ripped out, in my opinion. It's like, you know, if this thing that we keep pursuing and talking about isn't landing on actual human beings, like maybe it's not that good in the first place. So yeah, that's what I was thinking about as you were kind of using that language of like, it's not working. It's not working.
And I'm still trying to land on what that is. But to wrap things up, I just wanted to get your final thoughts on, like, I don't know if we went into like the definition of radical empathy. I'm sure you guys can piece together what that is, but how do you feel that you can contribute that now? Do you feel like you're like, I need a minute before I can do this? Or you're like, I'm ready? Or like, where are you guys at? Because that's kind of the point to this podcast. No? To be radically empathetic about humans and why they do the things they do, even if we don't agree. You don't have to answer this. I don't even know how to answer it, actually. That's why I asked it. I don't know. But yeah, anyone wants to take a shot at that? Freddie, go first. Just kidding.
No pressure.
I mean, I just need a minute. I think I'm still trying to, like, this past week was hard. Like, I just couldn't even, I didn't have the energy to hold a lot of conversations. I'm just now starting to get to a place where I can talk about what's going on, because it's, you know, it's just the reality of it. And I know, like, when January comes, like, that's it. Like, we're just gonna have to be able to deal with it, and how we decide to deal with it is on us. And so I don't feel like I have a choice but to ask questions, because if we want to continue just to be on the opposite ends of the spectrum, we can do that, but that really is not, as we know, it's not going to get us anywhere. And I truly do believe that there is more that connects us than divides us, and I really do believe that. So I want to just find those connections and find what it is that really bonds us. What are those things that we are both experiencing, that common ground, so I can understand each other better. But right now, I just kind of want to, you know, be to myself and remain a little ignorant and just be like, just pretend that, you know, that this is not actually happening. But when I'm ready to have the conversations, and I'm ready to build some bridges to the other side.
I would say radical empathy implies it's hard to do. What I've been doing that's given me some peace of mind is doing the hard thing with praying for people. Like praying, just praying for the country. And yes, praying for our leadership, praying for Biden, praying for Trump, because I don't want him to fail. We fail, right? So that's what I'm doing. Also being open to having the conversations with people, because, and this is Sunday, so I'm about to get a little, preach on you.
Good.
There we go. But I will not let go of the biblical verse that talks about we do not fight with flesh and blood, but with principalities we cannot see. I will never let that cease from my mind. So I don't see, even if I know there's racist people over there, I don't see any of them as my enemy. I see them as people I need to understand. That's personally me. That could be a lot of kumbaya to some people, but I truly, and it's hard. It's not easy to do. It's not even easy to say out loud because people don't understand that point of view. But that's how I see radical empathy, and that's how it's showing up in my life. Jess. So,
Yeah, so I guess in my experiences, doing BLM with you, Brittany, and kind of being out in the community and having really big, intense conversations that not a lot of people actually get to have. Like, the circumstance was very unique, right? Like,
yeah.
How many people can say that they've been helped lead a discussion of what, a couple hundred people about colorism? Like, that's just not a thing that really happens that often.
Or what it is to be white.
Or what is the white experience, whatever. So I've been put in these interesting situations, but I think ultimately what it comes back down to for me is staying rooted in reality, because what I've learned is the day-to-day work, especially, I'm really happy with where I am now, working as a crisis specialist, but it's those one-on-one connections with real people, that's person to person, that makes me realize, to me, we always make the joke about doing the work. That is the work. It doesn't matter what you're doing. It doesn't matter your occupation. It doesn't really matter what you believe. Love is about doing the work with another person sitting or standing or on the other line across from you every single day, showing up, being willing to listen to that person, hear about their experience, their life story, and offering them the space to connect with you, to speak their truth without judgment. And ultimately I feel like that was the message of Christ, right? Be with the people who are being shunned by society for whatever reason. Sex workers, drug addicts, homeless people. And I'm fortunate enough to be able to talk to those people regularly every day. And frankly, part of what my goal is for the next 4 years is to do more volunteer work, because being boots on the ground, I don't really care about political affiliation at this point. What I care about is connecting with people who need love, who need support, who need resources. And I'm not saying this to be on a moral high horse either, because I totally agree the self-righteousness has to stop. But I think ultimately when you come at it from a place of I realized that I thought, doing this thing was going to make me feel some sort of way, but ultimately what I realized is just about other people. The best thing that I could get was being with other people and feeling like I genuinely affected something, and all the other stuff is just ego. So why even bother with it at this point?
Yeah, that's true. And you mean doing this thing, you mean BLM, right?
What did I say specifically? Just
this thing didn't get you what you thought it would get you, or something.
So I think, just even some of the experiences of 2020, realizing it doesn't matter if you were there first. It doesn't matter if you were saying the right things. If people don't want to receive that message, if people want to erase you or the work that you did, and not saying that happened with BLM specifically, but there were a lot of people in my life that turned their back on me in one way, shape, or form, that suddenly were all about this racial justice stuff. And realizing that ultimately politics, social justice, the narrative is always going to change, and it's going to have a historical context, but what I can control is my relationship to other people. That's kind of what I was getting at. Does that make sense?
Yeah. So Brittany, I love that verse, believe it or not, and I think there's something so powerfully true about it, in that there's the older I get, the more I feel like there is just something so obviously beneath the surface that is happening and being fought, and I think we see that kind of in our own individual lives, but we also see it collectively. I think when I'm least empathetic is when I'm most disconnected from myself, and when I can't give my own powerlessness or fragility some compassion, You know, like when I should be able to, you know, that's when, you know, I'm going to do this. I'm going to project that outward too. But in order to get there with a human relationship, it does require like some trust and some commitment. And yeah, I mean, if radical empathy is the phrase we're going to use, yeah, I don't think I went into that conversation knowing it was going to be as raw as it was, but I did know that there was going to be some seriousness to the conversation.
Mhm.
And so I left thinking like, oh my gosh, like you just blessed me so much by like just offering me your story, you know? And yeah, I think that's what we can do with and for each other is offer the parts of our story that that will resonate.
Mm-hmm. And I think human connection just is such a powerful thing, which I will use another Bible verse. When God said to love your neighbor as yourself, like that's the second greatest commandment. And I believe there's a big reason on why human connection is so important. But to wrap everything up, what you said, Chris, and what everyone has said kind of reminded me of James Baldwin, and I'm paraphrasing, but when he said that you think you're alone until you start to read, which means until you start to understand other backgrounds and other people. And I think that is paramount right now. It's just being curious about other people and why we tick the way we do and why we are the way we are. But with that said, thank you guys for sharing your thoughts and your time for almost 2 hours. I appreciate you. We do not have a podcast name, so I'm not even going to outro that. But thank you guys very much. And cut right there. All right. Wow.